I never imagined I'd end up where I am now. If you had told me 10 years ago that I'd own a successful startup, I would have laughed. I wasn't exactly the entrepreneurial type. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do with my life, let alone start a business. But here's the story of how everything changed, and how the hustle, failure, and unexpected breaks led me to where I am today. I grew up in a small town. My parents ran a mom-and-pop store, selling anything from groceries to household items. It wasn't much, but it was ours. My dad was a no-nonsense guy, and my mom was the heart of the business. They taught me early on that hard work was the key to making it. But if I'm being honest, I didn't see the appeal of their lifestyle. I watched them put in long hours, and I always thought there had to be more to life than just scraping by. As a kid, I had dreams, big dreams. I wanted to be an architect, a designer, maybe even a tech guru. I wasn't sure, but I knew I didn't want to follow in my parents' footsteps. I went to college for graphic design, hoping it would open some doors. The first year was rough. I was in over my head, trying to figure out not just the technical side of things, but also how to fit in with a bunch of strangers who seemed to have it all figured out. By the second year, I'd started to get the hang of it, but I still wasn't sure what my thing was. One day, during a particularly low period where I was questioning my choice of career, a professor brought in a guest speaker. The speaker was a successful entrepreneur who had built his own company from scratch. He wasn't much older than me and shared his story in a way that made me feel like it was possible for someone like me to do it too. He talked about failing multiple times before finding success, about taking risks, and about believing in his own vision when no one else did. It struck a chord with me. I remember thinking, that's what I need. A vision. But my path didn't go from that moment straight to success. In fact, it took me years to find my way. After graduating, I worked for a few design agencies. I learned a lot, but the corporate world wasn't for me. I didn't like the idea of being just another cog in the machine. My job was to create designs that someone else would get the credit for. Over time, I got disillusioned. I started working on my own side projects, mostly freelance design work. That was where I felt the most alive, creating something from scratch that I could proudly put my name on. Eventually, I decided to take a leap. I quit my job and started my own freelance design business. It wasn't easy at first. The first few months were brutal. I had no clients, and even when I did land some work, I was often underpaid and overworked. I was hustling nonstop, learning how to market myself, negotiating contracts, and trying to figure out the business side of things. But I loved it. Every failure felt like a lesson, and every little victory felt like a glimpse into the future. It was during this time that I started to notice a trend. Many of my clients, small businesses, struggled to build an online presence. They had websites that looked like they hadn't been touched in years, and their social media was non-existent. I had always been passionate about digital design, but I realized that many of these businesses needed more than just a new logo or a website redesign. They needed a digital strategy, a brand identity that would connect with their audience. It clicked. In 2017, I decided to pivot. I didn't just want to be a freelance designer anymore. I wanted to build something bigger. I started offering digital marketing services along with my design work. I built my own team of designers, copywriters, and developers, and together, we helped small businesses create their digital presence from the ground up. It wasn't easy at first. People were skeptical. My team was small, and we were competing against larger, more established agencies. But I was hungry, and I knew we could offer a personalized approach that bigger companies couldn't. The first year of this new venture was a grind. We had a few wins, but there were also plenty of setbacks. We lost clients, struggled to pay salaries, and faced constant pressure to prove ourselves. But we kept pushing forward. The key was understanding that success wouldn't come overnight. It would come from persistence, learning from mistakes, and constantly improving our services. Then, in 2018, everything changed. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, when I got a message from a potential client, one of the biggest retailers in the area. They were looking for help with a complete rebranding and a comprehensive digital marketing strategy. I almost didn't believe it. This was a company that had been in business for decades, and they were asking us, a small team with no track record, to help them with such an important project. We won the contract. It was the break we needed. I poured everything I had into that project, and the result was beyond anything I could have imagined. Their website traffic doubled within the first 2 months of launching the new site, and sales skyrocketed. The success of that project gave us credibility, and more clients started coming our way. From there, things snowballed. We gained more high-profile clients, and our team grew. We expanded our services to include content marketing, SEO, and paid ads. But the key to our success was never about chasing the next big thing. It was about understanding our clients' needs and building solutions that help them grow. I learned that in business, it's not just about being the best. It's about being the most reliable, the most dedicated, and the most passionate about what you do. By 2020, we had become a full-service digital marketing agency. Our client base was diverse, ranging from local mom-and-pop shops to large e-commerce brands. I looked back at where I had started, working alone in my small apartment, and couldn't believe how far we had come. But I knew this was just the beginning. It's now 2025, and my company has grown even more. We've reached clients across the globe, and I have a team of 50 amazing people who share my vision. We've weathered the ups and downs of the economy, market changes, and internal challenges. But I've learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight line. There will always be unexpected turns, setbacks, and moments where you question everything. What keeps you going is the belief that you're building something bigger than yourself. Looking back, I see that everything I've gone through, the failures, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, were all part of the process. They shaped who I am today and helped me build the business I have now. If there's one piece of advice I would give to anyone thinking of starting their own business, it's this: don't expect it to be easy. There will be days when you want to quit, but those are the days that matter most. Push through them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. I'm proud of where I am now, but I know I'm just getting started. There's always more to learn, more to build, and more ways to grow. I can't wait to see where this journey takes me next. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was a divorced dad, broke, and sleeping in a storage unit. Today, I run a $3.2M / your logistics software company. I'm not a genius. I just stopped lying to myself. Let me take you back 6 years. I was 34, managing a failing local courier business in Indiana that my cousin roped me into. I was working 12-hour days, barely pulling in $700 a month. I had just finalized a brutal divorce and was paying $650 in child support. My credit score was a joke. My checking account had bounced 4 times in a single month, and I had been evicted from my apartment. I told people I was crashing with a friend. That was a lie. I had a mattress on the concrete floor of a rented 10 by 20 storage unit. I kept a gym membership so I could shower. I'd sneak in after hours with a flashlight and a padlock I picked up at a flea market. I hid my laptop in the lining of my suitcase and backed up everything on 3 separate USB drives in case I got robbed. That's where it started. I wasn't special. I didn't have some brilliant idea. I was just angry. At myself, mostly. I was the guy who thought he was too smart for a 9-to-5, but had nothing to show for it except a hard drive full of half-finished business plans and a trail of abandoned freelance gigs. I had to change. The first break came weirdly, an Amazon package. I was working late at the courier gig, and one of our drivers called in sick. I had to make 5 urgent deliveries myself. One of them was to a small e-commerce seller. The guy was frustrated. He'd been paying out the nose for late shipments because USPS kept screwing up pickups. He asked if we could do same-day pickups daily. I said yes. We weren't doing that, but I said yes anyway. I went back and cobbled together a spreadsheet to manually schedule his pickups. The next week, another seller he knew called me. Then another. Within a month, we were picking up packages from 11 small Amazon sellers. I quit my cousin's courier company and started freelancing logistics full-time. I didn't have a business name. I just used my personal PayPal. I rented a van for $325 week and drove 180 miles a day. I was losing money on fuel, but I learned everything. How e-commerce businesses think about shipping, what they hated about FedEx, how USPS pickup windows were a joke, how Shopify didn't play well with WooCommerce, and how none of these sellers had any system to track pickups across multiple couriers. And that's when it clicked. They didn't need another delivery guy. They needed someone who could make all their shipments and pickups talk to each other. A dashboard, even a basic one. I didn't know how to code, but I knew how to wireframe. I learned Balsamic in 2 days and made a basic mock-up. One dashboard where sellers could see their daily pickups, scan barcodes to confirm drop-offs, and get notified if a shipment was delayed. I called it Route Logic, bought a domain for $9.99, and posted it on a small e-commerce seller subreddit. For DMs in the first 48 hours. One guy asked if it integrated with Pirate Ship. I didn't know what that was, so I lied and said we were working on it. I went back and taught myself the Pirate Ship API from the documentation that night. I hired a part-time React developer from the Philippines for $12/hour. My first real customer paid $79 for a monthly license. I cried in the van. Not because of the $79, because it meant I didn't have to drive to Fishers, Indiana that day for a package that barely covered gas. By month 4, I had 31 customers. I moved out of the storage unit and into a basement I found on Craigslist. No windows, low ceiling, but a lock on the door and a real bed. The website looked like garbage, but it worked. Year 1 revenue $41,700. I made $19,000 in profit after expenses. I lived off ramen and expired canned food from a liquidation store. But I listened. Every support email, every rant from a seller about UPS losing packages, I wrote it down. I found patterns. People wanted batch scanning. They wanted one-click carrier switching. They wanted to auto-generate claims when packages went missing. I built all of it. Then I got a phone call that changed everything. It was a guy named Devin, ran a 7-figure candle business on Etsy and Shopify. He said he heard about Route Logic from a Facebook group. He wanted to integrate with ShipStation and offer branded tracking pages. I quoted him $6,000 for a 6-month license. I said it with my voice shaking. He wired me the money that same day. That money let me hire my first full-time dev. We built everything he asked for. He referred 5 other sellers doing similar volume. I went from ramen to real groceries. I bought a second-hand Prius. The year after that, I hit $380,000 in ARR. I got into an e-commerce incubator in Austin. Moved there, slept on a couch for 3 months. Pitched to 14 VCs, got turned down by 13. One guy offered me $100K for 10%, and I took it. That was a mistake, in hindsight, but I needed it. Route Logic became Logic Route. Don't ask. It was a domain issue. I went upstream. Built integrations for 3PLs and warehouses. Landed my first $100K/your enterprise client in year 4. Hired a real support team. Finally stopped doing customer service at 2 a.m. Today, we do $3.2 million a year in revenue. We're 17 people. Profitable. I live in a modest house in East Austin. My kids have their own bedrooms when they visit. I still drive the same Prius. People think it was one big leap. It wasn't. It was 10,000 small ones. Showing up to pickups. Teaching myself APIs. Googling how to pitch VCs. Eating crap food and ignoring the voice that said, this won't work. Most of all, it was this. I stopped pretending I had time. I stopped telling myself I'd start Monday. I started acting like my back was against the wall because it was. You don't need $1 million idea. You need a $10 problem that 10,000 people have. Solve that. Then keep solving until people throw money at you to shut up and take it. If you're reading this and you're stuck, I'll say one thing. It's not too late. But it will be soon. Back in 2018, I was that guy who thought he'd find himself by quitting his 9-to-5 job and backpacking through Southeast Asia. Yeah, I know how that sounds. I had $12,000 saved, a few freelance clients on Upwork doing basic WordPress work, and a vague dream of starting a travel blog. The idea was simple. Write about my journey, post on Instagram, grow an audience, and eventually get paid through affiliate links or sponsorships. It was the kind of dream everyone has but almost no one sustains. Spoiler, the travel blog flopped. For nearly a year, I traveled, wrote detailed posts about local street food, tiny ghost houses, cultural nuances, and took tons of DSLR photos. I poured myself into the content. I optimized every post for SEO using plugins. I even cold emailed dozens of backpacker gear companies and tourism boards. The blog never got more than 1,500 monthly views. I made backslash $183 in affiliate commissions that entire year. What I did manage to do was get good at WordPress, SEO, photo editing, and managing blog backend stuff like hosting and CDN configurations. While staying in Da Nang, Vietnam, I joined a local co-working space. I met a German guy named Timo who had an e-commerce store selling home fitness gear in the EU. He needed help speeding up his Shopify site and fixing broken page layouts. I offered to do it for backslash $300. It took me 2 days, and he was thrilled. That was the first seed. From there, Timo referred me to his business partner. I cleaned up his product page structure, fixed a weird checkout bug, and set up proper Google Analytics tracking. Word got around. I kept freelancing on the side while still chasing the ghost of a travel blog. In early 2020, when the pandemic hit, my travel dream ended. I had to go back home to the US and move in with my parents in Ohio. My freelance income had grown to about backslash $3,000 a month by then, almost entirely from small Shopify tweaks, site optimization, and e-commerce consulting for small stores. These weren't high-paying gigs individually, but I was fast and efficient. But here's where the turning point came. I decided to stop seeing myself as a freelancer and start acting like an agency. I rebranded my personal site into something that looked more official, clean layout, service packages, testimonials, etc. I named the agency Upcurve Labs, bought a .co domain, and created tiered pricing. Instead of backslash $50/HR gigs, I offered backslash $1, $500 and backslash $3,000 optimization sprints and conversion audits. I also stopped working with anyone who wasn't running a real store with over backslash $10,000/month in revenue. It was scary saying no, but the quality of clients shot up immediately. I went from hustling for backslash $300 tasks to clients happily paying backslash $2K because I could actually increase their conversion rates and site speed. By late 2020, I was booked out 2 months in advance. The real, oh shit, moment came when I hit a wall. I couldn't take on more clients. I was working 70 hours a week, burning out, and the thought of hiring scared me. I thought no one could do the work like I did. But I remembered how Timo once told me, "You're not building a business unless you can leave for a week and it still runs." So I made my first hire, a developer from the Philippines named Arvin. I found him through a WordPress forum where he was helping people fix bugs. I gave him a test job. He wasn't perfect, but he was fast, coachable, and honest. I brought on Arvin at backslash $800/month full-time. That month, I did backslash $12K in revenue. Then I hired a copywriter in the UK, a project manager in Canada, and later a CRO conversion rate optimization specialist from Brazil. We were suddenly a fully remote, international team. I invested in Notion, Slack, and a client portal using software. I focused on systems, SOPs for audits, onboarding checklists, templates for Shopify themes, reusable script snippets. Everything became templatized. By 2022, we were doing backslash $25K, backslash $30K a month consistently. But 2023 was where we leveled up. We started offering full redesigns for high-traffic Shopify stores. That's when we got our first backslash $18,000 project. It took 6 weeks, 3 team members, and a ton of stress, but the client loved it, came back for a retainer deal, and referred 2 more brands to us. That year we hit backslash $400K in revenue. I finally moved out of my parents' house, rented a place in Austin, and started living like a semi-normal adult again. We hired a part-time CFO to help with taxes, and I started paying myself a backslash $5K/month salary, keeping most of the profit in the business for growth. Now in 2025, we're pacing to cross backslash $480K this year, and we've just signed our first 6-figure annual retainer client. Lessons I've learned that might help others. 1. Start with what people already pay for. My travel blog failed because no one pays for stories. But they do pay to make their website faster or convert better. 2. Freelancing is not a business unless you productize or scale. As long as your time is the bottleneck, you own a job, not a company. 3. Charge more, but only if you can deliver more. We didn't go from backslash $300 gigs to backslash $10K projects by faking it. We got better, faster, and built processes to handle scale. 4. Niche down, then level up. We started with small Shopify fixes, and now we're trusted Shopify partners doing full store optimizations. 5. Hiring is the scariest and best thing you'll do. The right people multiply you. The wrong ones drain you. Learn to spot both early. Would I do it all over again? Honestly, I don't know. There were a lot of 14-hour days, failed projects, refund fights, and anxious nights staring at striped dashboards. But now, I get to work with a small, smart team, help real businesses grow, and build something that exists outside of myself. And the irony? That old travel blog still exists. It's now a case study on our site, how we went from 1,500 visitors to 50K/month through speed optimization. Total clickbait, but it works. You never really know where failure will take you. Would love to hear if anyone else stumbled into a business in a weird way. I started a successful business almost by accident and nearly lost everything because I didn't understand what I was building. Back in 2018, I was working a soul-numbing job in a cubicle farm for a mid-sized marketing firm. My day consisted of writing email campaigns, A/B testing subject lines, and enduring status meetings that could have been emails. I wasn't miserable exactly, but I had this constant, low-grade feeling that I was wasting time I'd never get back. My escape was tinkering with side projects. I wasn't a genius coder or anything, but I knew enough HTML, CSS, and Python to build weird little tools for myself. One of those tools changed my life. It started with a frustration. I was subscribed to a bunch of newsletters, but I only cared about a few topics. I wanted a way to automatically scan my inbox, pull out content about certain keywords, and summarize them. So I built a basic Gmail scraper and tied it to an NLP library that could generate short summaries. It was janky, but it worked. I showed it to my buddy Josh, who worked in finance. He was way more impressed than I expected. Dude, do you know how many people would kill for this? I get over 50 reports a day. I'd pay you right now if this could summarize PDFs too. That was the first light bulb. I didn't think much of it at first, but a few weeks later I was talking to a woman at a networking event who worked in law. I casually described the tool, and she lit up. If this could summarize legal briefs, it'd save me hours a week. So I went home that night and stayed up until 3 a.m., trying to expand it. I integrated a basic OCR function for PDFs, trained a crude summarizer on some public legal documents, and cobbled together a very rough interface. It was ugly as hell, but it kind of worked. I called it Sift. That was the name I gave it when I posted a demo video on LinkedIn, just a quick walkthrough of my weekend project that summarized documents automatically. I didn't expect much, maybe a few likes. Instead, the post went viral. Overnight, I had dozens of DMs from lawyers, consultants, analysts, researchers. People wanted to try it. Some wanted to pay me. A few VCs reached out, asking if I was raising. I panicked. I wasn't trying to build a company. I didn't know how. I'd never raised money, managed a team, or launched a product. I was a guy with a script running on Flask, deployed on Heroku. But I said yes anyway. Within 2 weeks, I quit my job. I'd saved some money, and I figured I had maybe 4 months of runway to try this full-time. I rented a tiny co-working space, set up a Stripe page, and spun up a basic SaaS model $19/month for summaries, $49/month for advanced filters, and a $99/month pro plan with API access. To my shock, people paid. Within the first 3 months, I had 300 paying users. I wasn't making big money, but it was more than my old salary. I was getting emails daily from people thanking me, telling me Sif saved them hours. I felt like a genius. That's when I made my first big mistake. A well-known VC firm reached out. They wanted to invest $500K. I was flattered and intimidated. They talked about growth, scale, product market fit, CAC, LTV, half of which I had to Google later. But I nodded along and signed the term sheet. Now I had money, expectations, and pressure. I hired quickly 2 developers, 1 customer success person, and a designer. I moved into a bigger office and started trying to act like a real startup. That meant building a roadmap, doing weekly stand-ups, and chasing features that investors wanted. I lost the thread. I was no longer building for users. I was building to impress. We added Slack integrations, dashboards, team accounts, analytics, and buried the core functionality under layers of UI. Support tickets exploded. Users started canceling. NPS dropped. But I kept pushing forward, thinking the next release would fix everything. Spoiler, it didn't. By the end of year 1, we were burning $50K/month and revenue had plateaued. I had to lay off half the team. The VC wasn't happy. I remember sitting in my car after that call, staring at the steering wheel, thinking, I ruined it. That night, I shut my laptop and went for a walk. It sounds corny, but I started thinking about the version of SIF that made people excited in the first place. The raw, fast, no BS summarizer that just worked. That's what people loved, not the bloated monstrosity we turned it into. So I made a brutal decision. I killed every feature that didn't serve the original value proposition. No teams, no dashboards, no integrations. Just fast, clean document summaries. Users came back. Slowly, then more quickly. Word spread in a few niche legal forums. An education startup offered to license our summarizer for student research. Revenue climbed. I didn't hire anyone new. I kept it lean, automated support with chatbots, and focused entirely on delivering what I promised. By the middle of year 2, we were profitable again. Not unicorn level, but sustainable. I paid off the VC with a buyout clause and went fully independent. Now, in 2025, SIFT has 14,000 active users. I have a team of 6. We're growing modestly but intentionally. I don't chase trends or burn for growth. We build tools people actually use. Looking back, I think the biggest lesson I learned is that building a business isn't about complexity, it's about clarity. I spent so much time trying to be impressive that I forgot to be useful. The magic wasn't in the tech, it was in how it solved a specific, painful problem for real people. If you're out there building something, here's what I'd say. Strip it down. Talk to your users. Focus on the one thing you do best, and do it better than anyone else. The rest is noise. I'm not really sure how to start this, but I'll say up front, I'm not one of those startup founders with an Ivy League degree or a massive following on LinkedIn. I'm just a guy who had a bunch of crap happen and eventually figured out how to turn it into something useful. What I ended up building completely unintentionally was a niche landscaping supply business that made $2.3 million in revenue last year. But rewind 6 years, and I was delivering pizza in a truck with no air conditioning, wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. I dropped out of college in 2012 after 2 years of a computer science program that I never really liked. I got a job at a local IT support company, which seemed okay at first but slowly drained every ounce of motivation I had. The boss was a micromanager, the clients treated us like garbage, and the pay was barely enough to cover rent and groceries. After 3 years of that grind, I finally quit, thinking I'd go freelance and pick up more interesting work. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I got maybe 3 small gigs in 6 months and burned through my savings. At this point, I was back home, sleeping on a futon in my parents' basement, 26 years old, feeling like a complete failure. I picked up delivery driving and warehouse shifts just to stay afloat. One of those jobs was delivering building supplies to contractors around town. That's where the first tiny seed of my future business was planted, although I didn't realize it at the time. One of the guys I delivered to regularly, an old-school landscaper named Frank, used to chat with me while his crew unloaded pallets of bricks or mulch. He'd always joke that the real money was in the dirt. I thought he meant figuratively, like hard work or construction. But one day I asked him what he actually meant, and he said, "No, I mean literal dirt. Screen topsoil, compost, sand. People don't think about it, but every garden, every new lawn, every damn playground needs it. And they'll pay a lot for good stuff." That stuck in my head. I didn't have a grand vision, but I started noticing how often people were hauling soil and mulch into their yards. I started Googling suppliers and realized there was a weirdly fragmented market for landscaping materials. No one had great websites. No one was offering delivery scheduling online. Most of it was done through phone calls, word of mouth, and physical yard signs. Then I made what I thought was a big mistake. I had saved up about $200 from a few gigs and wanted to try flipping furniture on Craigslist. I bought an old used dump trailer thinking I could haul junk or furniture for extra money. I was way out of my depth. The thing was rusty, had a bad axle, and I overpaid like an idiot. I couldn't return it. So now I had this beat-up trailer and no real plan. But I remembered what Frank said about dirt. On a whim, I posted an ad on Facebook Marketplace offering topsoil delivery. I had no topsoil, no supply chain, just a trailer and desperation. Within a day, I had 2 people message me asking how much for 3 yards. I Googled a local soil yard, saw that they sold bulk soil for $18 per yard. I told my customer $35/yard, delivery included. They said yes. I called the soil yard, picked up 3 yards in my janky trailer, praying it didn't fall apart, and dropped it off in the customer's driveway. I made $51 in profit in one afternoon. Was it a big payday? No. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had done something. I made money from nothing but a trailer, an ad, and a few phone calls. I did it again the next weekend, then twice more the week after. Within a month, I was delivering 4 to 5 times a week. It wasn't scalable yet, and I was still losing time and money to small things, flat tires, scheduling errors, dumping fees. But the demand was real. People needed materials, and nobody was making it easy for them. I built a basic website on Wix. I used a free scheduling tool and a burner phone. My brand was just a name I made up on the spot, Earthdrop Delivery. My marketing was simple. I posted before and after photos of driveways with soil dumps, and I joined a few local Facebook groups for gardening and DIY home improvement. The next turning point came 6 months in when I met Marcy. She ran a nursery and landscaping business and was tired of doing her own hauling. I offered to handle her bulk delivery if she sent her customers to me. We worked out a split on fees, and suddenly I had a semi-regular volume of jobs coming in. I reinvested everything. Fixed the trailer, bought a newer used truck, hired a part-time helper. Then I started getting calls asking if I delivered gravel, sand, mulch, even firewood. I said yes to everything and figured out the supply chain later. Within the first year, I made just over $98,000 in revenue. I paid myself almost nothing, but I finally moved out of my parents' house and rented a tiny place near the edge of town. My office was a folding table in the corner of the living room. Year 2 was when it got real. I brought in a college kid part-time to build a proper website with online scheduling. I got a business loan for a new trailer and a used flatbed. I built partnerships with 3 supply yards and negotiated better pricing. I even rented a 1/4 acre lot to use as a temporary holding yard for materials during peak season. By year 3, I had 5 part-time drivers, a dispatcher, and revenue crossed $500K. Most of my leads came from Facebook, Google local searches, and a referral system I built with landscapers. I started offering subscription deliveries for people who wanted compost every season or mulch every spring. I remember getting my first 5-figure monthly profit and just sitting in my truck, staring at the dashboard, stunned. I had sold literal dirt and turned it into a legitimate business. Fast forward to now, we do about $2.3 million a year. I have a team of 14, some seasonal, some full-time, and operate in 3 counties. We've added snow removal and storm debris cleanup in the off-season. We have custom software to handle scheduling, dispatch, and pricing dynamically by zip code. It's not sexy. It's not Silicon Valley. But it's real. Here's what I learned. 1. People pay for convenience more than they pay for products. Soil is dirt cheap, pun intended. But people don't want to deal with hauling, measuring, or timing. Solve those headaches and you win. 2. Don't wait for the perfect plan. I started this business by accident. If I had waited to understand logistics, margins, or marketing, I'd still be delivering pizzas. 3. Market where your customers already are. Facebook groups and Google reviews made this business. Not ads. Not influencers. 4. Niche is everything. I didn't try to be a contractor, or a landscaper, or a retailer. I became the best damn bulk delivery guy in town. Focus wins. 5. Take pride in unsexy. Everyone wants to build the next app. Sometimes the boring business is the one that pays. I don't know where this will go next. We're experimenting with franchising the model in a neighboring state. But if it all crashed tomorrow, I'd still be proud. I built something from nothing, and I proved to myself I wasn't a failure. And to think, it all started with a broken trailer and a pile of dirt. 3 years ago, I was working in product development at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago. I liked my job, good coworkers, decent pay, lots of autonomy, but I was also pretty comfortable. Too comfortable. The company was acquired in late 2019, and by March 2020, that March, I got the dreaded calendar invite titled, Your Role. They gave me 3 weeks' pay as severance. I had $9,000 in my savings account and no real clue what to do next. At the time, my only side hustle was flipping sneakers on StockX and GOAT. I'd been collecting for years, mostly Jordans, Yeezys, and some limited edition collabs, and every so often I'd resell pairs to fund new ones. Nothing serious. Just enough to justify my addiction to buttery leather and gum soles. For the first 2 months after I got laid off, I applied to jobs during the day and spent my nights either gaming or checking sneaker drops. I was half depressed, half in denial. Then something weird happened. A pair of off-white Jordan 5s I'd bought 2 years earlier suddenly skyrocketed in price. I bought them for $350. They were going for $1,800. I sold them immediately. Then I sold another pair. And another. By the end of April, I'd made just over $6,500 flipping sneakers I already owned. That gave me an idea. I pulled up every sneaker drop calendar I could find. I started watching Reddit groups and Discord servers obsessively. I built a simple spreadsheet to track demand, supply, and resale prices. I wasn't thinking business yet. I just wanted to see if I could keep paying rent without getting another tech job. I started entering every raffle I could. Even had my girlfriend sign up for accounts so I could double dip. I bought bots, crappy ones at first, then upgraded as I learned which ones worked. I burned through some early wins, like the chunky dunkies, to reinvest in inventory. I didn't have a grand plan. I just kept following the margins. By the end of 2020, I'd made $36,000 profit. Nothing insane, but enough to cover my expenses. In January 2021, I made a decision that changed everything. I leased a 450 square foot storage unit on the west side. Up to that point, my tiny apartment had been overrun with shoeboxes. I couldn't think straight, let alone live normally. The storage unit felt like a luxury, but it also made me treat the reselling like a real job. I went all in. I started waking up at 6 a.m. to prep for drops. I tracked every package. I organized inventory by SKU. I built a second spreadsheet for profit tracking. And I started manually reaching out to small sneaker stores across the country. A surprising number of them were open to doing bulk deals, especially if they needed quick cash. I found one store in Indiana that sold me 40 pairs of Jordan 1s under retail. That single connection made me $4,000 in profit within a month. By the summer of 2021, I was clearing $10K/month in profit. I incorporated as an LLC, stupidly late, but better late than never, hired a part-time assistant to help with shipping, and leased a larger 1,200 square foot warehouse spot. Around this time, I also started experimenting with direct-to-consumer. StockX and Goat were great, but their fees were killing my margins. I launched a bare-bones Shopify store, added a few bestsellers, and created an Instagram account. I wasn't expecting much, but 3 things happened that made the store explode. 1. A customer posted an unboxing video on TikTok that went viral. I gained 7K followers overnight. 2. I partnered with a local Chicago influencer who loved sneakers and gave me a shout-out in a podcast. 3. I started offering a mystery box, a curated box of 2 to 3 pairs at a fixed price, based on buyer preferences. The mystery box went mini-viral on sneaker Twitter. People love the gamble. Some boxes had general release pairs, but others had Travis Scott's or rare collabs. I made sure the total value always exceeded what they paid, so it felt like a win-win. In December 2021, we had our first 6-figure month. I freaked out. I had to hire 2 more people, both sneakerheads I knew from online forums. We moved to a 2,500 square foot warehouse next to a brewery in Logan Square. I started buying entire store inventories from boutiques going out of business. I struck a deal with a liquidation firm that gave me early access to Nike Overstock. I even hired a dev to build a custom dashboard to track resale value fluctuations in real time. By mid-2022, I'd stopped applying to jobs. Hell, I stopped even thinking about my old life. I flew to sneaker conventions in LA, NYC, and Tokyo. I started selling rare pairs to NBA player stylists. I had a guy who bought $20,000 worth of sneakers for his private jet crew. I felt like I'd stumbled into a video game with real-life loot drops. Of course, it wasn't all hype in WS. 1 month in 2022, I lost $18,000 on a bulk Yeezy order after Adidas dropped Kanye. Bots glitched during a Travis Scott drop, and I missed hundreds of pairs. The Shopify site got DDoS'd. I even had a warehouse break-in, thankfully insured, but I still lost $9K in unrecoverable inventory. But I kept going. Now, in 2025, we're a full-blown operation. 10 employees. 6,000 square foot warehouse. A YouTube channel. A sneaker authentication service. Last year, we cleared $1.7 million in revenue with just under $420K in profit. I still haven't raised outside funding. I still haven't gone mainstream. I'm not sure I want to. People ask if I'm passionate about sneakers. Not really. I like them. I appreciate the culture. But what I really love is the game, the margins, the logistics, the psychology of hype. I love outsmarting the system, finding inefficiencies, moving faster than the big guys. I love building something real from nothing but hustle, timing, and Google Sheets. And if you're wondering whether I ever went back to a real job, I did, once. I consulted for a startup trying to launch a sneaker-focused NFT project. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I remember the first time I truly understood what it meant to hustle. I was 14, working at a local pizza shop after school. The pay was terrible, and I spent more time folding napkins than doing anything remotely exciting, but it gave me a taste of responsibility. It wasn't until a few months into that job that I started to look at the world differently. I realized that if I wasn't working for myself, I was just helping someone else get richer. It was an epiphany that stayed with me throughout my life. Fast forward to my early 20s. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing and business. The world was supposed to be my oyster, but it felt more like a shell with no pearl inside. I took a corporate job at a marketing firm, convinced that this was how you build a career. But after only a year, I felt stifled. I didn't want to be part of the corporate grind. I wanted to create something of my own. So one night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. and made a decision. I was going to quit my job, find something I was passionate about, and take the plunge into entrepreneurship. It wasn't easy. At all. The first year was a roller coaster of emotions. I started with an online store, selling custom-made t-shirts and merchandise. I'd always loved graphic design and thought it would be the perfect side business to get my feet wet in the entrepreneurial world. The problem was, I had no idea how to market my brand. I thought I could simply throw up a website, design a few shirts, and the sales would pour in. Spoiler alert, they didn't. For months, my website sat in obscurity. I remember checking Google Analytics every day, hoping for a miracle, but the numbers stayed the same. It was disheartening, but I refused to give up. I spent countless hours reading blog posts, watching YouTube videos, and joining online communities about digital marketing. Slowly, I started to piece things together. I learned about SEO, social media marketing, and how to connect with influencers. It was like a light bulb went off. My traffic started to grow, and with it, sales started to trickle in. The breakthrough came when I teamed up with a popular Instagram influencer who had a modest following in the fashion and lifestyle niche. She agreed to promote my shirts, and within a week, I saw a spike in orders. It wasn't a massive wave, but it was enough to tell me that I was on the right path. From there, I reached out to more influencers, optimized my website for SEO, and invested more in paid ads. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow. But the road wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when I thought I had made a huge mistake. The first holiday season was especially brutal. I underestimated how much inventory I would need, and by the time I was ready to ship out orders, I was already getting angry emails from customers who hadn't received their products. My heart sank as I read the complaints. The pressure was overwhelming. I had to get more creative with my marketing, streamline my production process, and ultimately, invest in inventory management software. It was a painful learning experience, but it taught me valuable lessons about customer service, inventory control, and the importance of preparation. By the time the second year rolled around, my business was in a much stronger position. I had a steady stream of sales, a loyal customer base, and an established brand. I could finally take a breath and feel proud of what I had built. But of course, the work wasn't over. Every business owner knows that once you've achieved a certain level of success, you can't just coast. There's always something more to do, something more to improve. At this point, I started to expand. I diversified my product line and began offering new designs and even branching into other apparel like hoodies and hats. I also started investing in building a community around my brand. I wasn't just selling shirts anymore. I was selling a lifestyle. My customers weren't just looking for clothing. They were looking for something that resonated with them, something that made them feel part of something bigger. I began collaborating with other creators and hosting giveaways. I created an online forum where customers could share their experiences, and I actively engaged with them. Then came the most significant pivot of all. I decided to make my business a subscription service. After surveying my audience, I realized that many of my customers loved my designs so much that they'd be willing to receive a new shirt every month. It was a bold move, but I believed it would give me more predictable revenue and a better connection with my customers. I started offering a monthly exclusive design subscription box that gave members first dibs on limited edition items. To my surprise, it took off. I was building a community of loyal fans who eagerly awaited their monthly packages. The recurring revenue gave me the confidence to scale even further. But with success came new challenges. I had to hire employees to handle customer service, manage inventory, and help with design. I also had to deal with the complexities of running a subscription-based business, shipping logistics, subscription management, and creating exclusive, high-quality designs that kept my customers coming back month after month. I knew that I couldn't just focus on sales. I had to nurture the community I had built and provide them with a unique experience that they couldn't get anywhere else. As the years went by, I learned to delegate more and focus on the bigger picture. I started building partnerships with other brands, working on collaborations that allowed us to reach wider audiences. I also ventured into retail and began selling my products in select stores while continuing to grow my online presence. I had come a long way from those early days of barely making any sales, and it felt surreal to see my brand on shelves in stores. Now, 5 years after I made that decision to quit my corporate job, my business is thriving. I've built a brand that I'm proud of, created jobs for people, and learned more about myself than I ever expected. I still make mistakes, and there are days when I wonder if I can keep up with the demands of running a business. But I've realized that success isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them and staying committed to the long-term vision. If you're considering starting your own business, my advice is simple. Be prepared to hustle and make mistakes. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And most importantly, never forget why you started. Entrepreneurship is a journey, not a destination. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and the idea of entrepreneurship seemed like something only people from the big city could pull off. My parents were both teachers, and while they instilled a strong work ethic in me, they also pushed the idea that success in life meant getting a steady job, a good salary, and not rocking the boat too much. The word entrepreneur was something I only heard when someone was talking about the big shots who owned businesses in town. I remember my first real entrepreneurial spark came when I was around 16. I was working at a local diner, washing dishes and doing odd jobs after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me pocket money and a chance to meet people. One afternoon, while cleaning a table, I overheard a conversation between a couple of regulars. They were talking about how frustrated they were with the lack of good, affordable graphic design in our town. They'd both recently opened small businesses and were struggling to find anyone who could make them a decent logo or website. I didn't know much about graphic design, but I knew the basics of Photoshop from tinkering around online. I remember thinking, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can help them. I didn't have the guts to speak up during that conversation, but the idea stuck with me for days. I started doing more research and watching tutorials on YouTube. I began practicing graphic design in my free time, trying to master the software. I spent hours creating logos for fictional businesses, learning about color theory, typography, and design principles. By the time I turned 18, I felt confident enough to pitch my skills to local businesses. I created a portfolio, set up a simple website, and started reaching out to small business owners, offering to design logos and promotional materials for them. The first person I approached was the owner of a small flower shop. I knew her because I'd been in her store a few times, buying gifts for my mom. I nervously walked in and told her what I was offering. She seemed skeptical but gave me a chance, mainly because I was offering to do the work for a ridiculously low price, basically just enough to cover my time and expenses. I spent hours designing a logo for her, tweaking it over and over until she was happy. When I showed it to her, she was impressed. That was the moment I realized this could actually work. Over the next few months, I picked up a few more clients, all local businesses who were either starting out or trying to rebrand. The money was small at first, but I was building a reputation. I wasn't making much, but I was learning, improving, and gaining confidence. Slowly, I started to feel like this could become something bigger. Then, the turning point came when I got an unexpected email. It was from a marketing agency in a nearby city. They had heard about my work through a mutual connection and wanted to know if I'd be interested in taking on some freelance design work for their clients. At first, I thought it was a scam, but after doing some research, I realized it was legit. This was the big break I had been waiting for. I took the plunge, quit my part-time job at the diner, and started working full-time as a freelancer. I quickly realized that working for larger clients meant tighter deadlines, higher expectations, and more pressure. But it also meant better pay and a chance to expand my skill set. The work was demanding, but I loved every minute of it. For the next couple of years, I honed my craft, built a strong network of clients, and learned the business side of things. I figured out how to manage my finances, deal with taxes, and set realistic goals. One of the biggest challenges was learning how to negotiate with clients and value my time correctly. At first, I was underpricing myself because I was afraid of losing work. But as I gained experience, I realized that my time and expertise were valuable. Slowly, I started raising my prices, and surprisingly, clients didn't mind. In fact, I started attracting higher-end clients who were willing to pay more for quality work. By the time I was 22, I was making more than I ever imagined. I had a steady stream of clients, and I had even hired a small team of designers to help with the workload. I had built a small design agency from scratch. It wasn't easy, and there were many sleepless nights and moments of doubt along the way, but it felt incredible to see my business grow. The first big challenge came when I was offered a project that required me to expand my business even further. A national retail chain had reached out, wanting to redesign their entire brand identity, from logos to store signage. The budget was massive, and I knew this would be a huge opportunity, but I also knew it would stretch my capabilities. I didn't have the infrastructure to handle a project of that size. For the first time in my entrepreneurial journey, I had to make a big decision. Should I accept the project and risk burning out? Or should I pass it up and continue growing slowly? I decided to take the risk. I hired more people, reached out to my network for additional support, and even took out a small business loan to cover some of the initial costs. It was a huge gamble, but the gamble paid off. The project was a success, and it put my business on the map. After that project, my agency began to take off. We started working with larger clients, and my team grew as well. I still remember the first time I signed a contract with a Fortune 500 company. It felt surreal. I had gone from washing dishes at a diner to negotiating deals with major corporations. But despite the growth and the success, I never forgot the lessons I learned when I was first starting out. Never undervalue your time, always keep learning, and never be afraid to take risks. Now, at 30, I'm the CEO of a successful design agency with clients all over the country. I'm still doing what I love, but now I have a team that helps me bring my ideas to life. I look back on those early days with a sense of pride, knowing that I took a leap of faith and built something from nothing. I never imagined that something as simple as overhearing a conversation at a diner could lead to all of this. It's been a long journey, and it hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it. If I have any advice for anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't wait for the perfect moment, because it may never come. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. The most important thing is to keep moving forward, one step at a time. If I can do it, so can you. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I remember the first day I stepped into the world of entrepreneurship. It wasn't some grand vision or an elaborate plan that sparked the idea. It was a series of small, almost inconsequential events that combined to form the foundation of my business. In hindsight, maybe that's the thing about entrepreneurship. It's never a single moment of brilliance, but a series of seemingly trivial decisions that, over time, culminate in something unexpected. It all started a few years ago when I was fresh out of college. I had the usual degree, but it didn't take long to realize that the job market wasn't exactly eager to welcome me with open arms. I spent months sending out resumes, attending interviews, and hoping for that golden opportunity. But no matter how many times I tweaked my cover letter or refined my interview answers, nothing seemed to stick. I couldn't help but feel like a failure as one rejection after another piled up. But then one day, as I was scrolling through social media, I saw something that changed everything. A friend posted a picture of their new handmade leather wallet. It was simple but beautiful, with clean stitching and a rich, warm color. My first thought wasn't about the craftsmanship, but about how unique and personal the wallet looked. It was clear that a lot of effort had gone into it, and yet, there it was, being sold for a fraction of the price I'd expect in a high-end boutique. I couldn't shake the thought. I had no idea how to make wallets, let alone sell them, but something inside me clicked. Maybe it was the frustration of not finding a job. Maybe it was just a desire to prove that I could make something work. Either way, I decided to try. I went to a local craft store and picked up some leather, needles, and thread. I found a few tutorials online, and after a few weeks of trial and error, I had my first wallet. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was mine, and it was the start of something. I didn't know where to go from there. The idea of selling it seemed laughable. Who would want to buy a wallet from a newbie like me? But I had the burning desire to find out. I started small, selling the wallet to friends and family. To my surprise, they were impressed and actually willing to pay for it. I began to get more creative, experimenting with different designs, stitching patterns, and leather types. Each time, the quality improved. Slowly but surely, I was starting to get better at it. Then came the next leap of faith. I built a website. It wasn't much, just a simple WordPress page, but it was enough to showcase what I was doing. I created social media accounts to build a brand and started posting regularly. I took photos of my wallets, shared my journey, and engaged with followers. The more I shared, the more I started to feel like this could be something. The community that I built around my product was small, but loyal. It wasn't just about selling a wallet. It was about telling a story. It was about the craftsmanship, the imperfections, and the passion that went into each piece. As time went on, my business started to grow. Slowly, but steadily. I continued to make wallets and other leather goods, and I learned to adapt to the market. I found suppliers who could provide better quality materials at a lower cost, which allowed me to keep my prices competitive. I took on custom orders, and with each new project, my skills improved. The first few months were rough. There were sleepless nights, countless mistakes, and a constant fear of failure, but I kept going, one step at a time. The real turning point came when I received an email from an influencer on Instagram. They had seen my wallets and wanted to feature one in an upcoming post. At first, I thought it was a joke, but after a bit of research, I realized that this influencer had a massive following. I decided to send a wallet their way, hoping for the best. When the post went live, I was floored. Within hours, my website traffic skyrocketed. Orders began to pour in. It wasn't just a small bump in sales, it was a full-blown wave. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. But with success came new challenges. The demand was growing, but I was still working out of my small apartment. I had no warehouse, no employees, and no real infrastructure. I quickly realized that I couldn't keep up with the orders on my own. I needed help. I started by hiring a few part-time assistants to help with assembly and packaging. It was a huge step, but I knew it was the only way to scale. We moved operations out of my apartment and into a small rented workshop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was functional. As the team grew, so did the business. We expanded our product line to include bags, belts, and other accessories. Every new product felt like another step forward, but it also brought its own set of challenges. I began attending trade shows and networking with other small business owners. I realized that I wasn't alone in this struggle. Everyone I met had their own stories of hardship, failure, and eventual success. It was comforting to know that the journey I was on wasn't unique. It was shared by countless others who had taken risks and fought hard for their dreams. And yet, there were still moments of doubt. The stress of running a business, managing a team, and staying on top of inventory was overwhelming at times. There were nights when I wondered if it was all worth it. But every time I felt like quitting, I'd get an email from a customer telling me how much they loved my product. Or I'd look at the stack of orders waiting to be processed and feel a sense of pride that I had built something from scratch. Today, my business is much larger than I ever expected it to be. We've moved into a bigger workshop, expanded our team, and have a steady stream of loyal customers. We sell our products worldwide, and our social media presence has grown exponentially. I've even started collaborating with other entrepreneurs and brands to reach new audiences. But despite the growth, I try to remind myself of where it all started. I remember that first wallet I made and the feeling of doubt that came with it. I think about the countless failures and lessons learned along the way. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect plan or always knowing what comes next. It's about taking small steps, learning from your mistakes, and adapting to the challenges you face. The journey is never easy, but for me, it's been worth every step. Looking back, I realized that the only thing that truly mattered was starting, taking that first step, even when I had no idea what would happen next. If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's this. You don't have to have everything figured out to start. The most important thing is to begin. Because once you do, the rest will follow, even if you don't always know where it will lead. I grew up in a small town, The kind where everyone knows everyone's business and dreams were often seen as things that other people had. We weren't poor, but we weren't exactly swimming in money either. My parents worked hard. My dad is a mechanic, my mom is a school teacher. The most exciting thing that happened around there was the county fair once a year. Despite the simple life, there was one thing I always knew for certain: I wanted more. I wanted to build something of my own. I didn't really understand what entrepreneurship meant back then. In fact, I thought business owners were people who had always been rich. The concept of starting from scratch seemed impossible to me. But when I was 18, I started working at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me a lot about people and the hustle required to make a living. One day, the owner, an old woman named Mrs. Liu, sat me down and shared her story. She had opened the diner when she was just 25, back in the 60s, using a loan from her aunt. Over the years, she had expanded the business and grown it into a local staple. She wasn't rich, but she was comfortable and she loved what she did. That conversation planted the seed. I realized that maybe entrepreneurship wasn't about waiting for some magical moment or being born into wealth. It was about hard work, consistency, and making the most of what you had. I decided that day I would start my own business. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I'd figure it out. I was determined. I didn't have any formal education in business, and I certainly didn't have the capital to launch some big idea. I'd be starting small, scraping together whatever I could. I had always loved technology, so I started by fixing computers and selling small electronics on the side. I bought old PCs, fixed them up, and resold them. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. I'd found my first niche. I spent every free moment learning how to troubleshoot hardware, installing software, and building custom systems. Over time, I built a small following of people who came to me for repairs, upgrades, and custom builds. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't making much money, and I was still working full-time at the diner. It was exhausting, and I felt like I was stuck in a cycle. Then one day, my cousin Alex called me out of the blue. He worked as a software developer in the city, and he was working on a mobile app idea that he thought could really take off. He told me he needed a business partner. I was skeptical at first. What did I know about apps? But he was confident that we could build something great together. I didn't hesitate. I saw this as my big opportunity to get out of the diner and into something bigger. We spent the next 6 months in his apartment, coding, designing, and brainstorming. The idea was simple: an app that would make it easier for small businesses to manage their inventory, track sales, and communicate with customers. The target market was local stores that didn't have access to expensive software but still needed something efficient. We launched the app with just a few small businesses using it. The first few months were rough. There were bugs, features that didn't work as expected, and some businesses that ended up abandoning the app because it didn't quite meet their needs. But we pushed through. We kept tweaking, improving, and listening to feedback. Slowly but surely, we started to gain traction. Our user base grew, and so did our confidence. Eventually, we managed to secure a small investment from a venture capital firm that saw the potential in our product. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give us the breathing room we needed to focus on improving the app and expanding our team. We hired a few developers and a marketing specialist to help us get the word out. The next year was a blur. We were working 80-hour weeks, barely sleeping, and constantly solving problems. But the payoff started coming. We reached 1,000 users, then 10,000. The app became a tool that small businesses relied on. We added features like point-of-sale systems, advanced reporting, and integration with other business tools. The more we listened to our users, the better our product became. Around the same time, I decided to quit the diner job for good. I was nervous at first, but I had no choice. If I wanted this to work, I had to go all in. So, I took a risk. I moved out of my small town and into the city, where I could be closer to the action, meet potential clients, and network with other entrepreneurs. It was a massive leap, but it felt right. With the app growing, I began speaking at small tech conferences and startup events. I loved sharing our story, meeting other entrepreneurs, and learning from their experiences. Slowly but surely, we built a reputation for being a startup that genuinely cared about its users and wasn't just focused on profits. But, of course, there were setbacks. As we grew, so did the pressure. We faced competition from bigger companies, and our small team started feeling stretched thin. We had to make tough decisions about whether to keep expanding or scale back and refine our product. The stress took its toll on me. There were nights I stayed up until 3 a.m., staring at a screen, wondering if I was making the right decisions. Then, the unexpected happened. A major competitor in the industry, one of the big players, reached out to us with an acquisition offer. They saw the value in what we had built and wanted to bring us under their umbrella. It wasn't something we had planned for, but after much discussion, we decided to take the deal. We were proud of what we had built, and the offer gave us the opportunity to scale faster and reach more businesses. The acquisition didn't make me rich, but it did give me a solid foundation to start something new. I took a break for a few months, reflecting on everything we had achieved and how far we had come. It was humbling. I had gone from working at a small diner to running a startup, and now I had the freedom to explore other ventures. Fast forward a few years, and I've since started a few more businesses. Some have succeeded, others have failed, but each one taught me something invaluable. Entrepreneurship is not just about the wins. It's about learning from your mistakes and continuing to evolve. You can't let fear stop you from moving forward. The most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who refuse to quit, even when things get tough. And as for the diner, Mrs. Liu still runs it, and it's still the heart of the town. Every time I go back to visit, I stop by to grab a cup of coffee and share stories with her. She still tells me that she's proud of what I've built. I'll never forget the lesson she taught me. You don't have to be born into success to achieve it. You just have to be willing to work for it. Now, I'm helping mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing my journey and guiding others through the ups and downs. No matter how many businesses I build, I'll always remember where I came from and how far a little ambition can take you. So, this is the story of how I went from being a broke college graduate with no real direction to owning a six-figure business. It was a wild ride that started in a cramped apartment and ended in a multi-location operation. Here's how it happened, and why I think anyone can do it if they're willing to put in the time and effort. I'll take you back to 2015, right after I graduated from college. I had a degree in business, but no clue what I wanted to do with it. I had spent the last 4 years partying, struggling to keep my grades above AC, and living off my parents' money. Sound familiar? I had zero work experience beyond a few internships that I barely showed up to. My student loans were piling up, and the future was looking pretty grim. I remember sitting in my tiny one-bedroom apartment in a crummy part of town. It was a Sunday morning, and I was staring at the clock thinking, what now? I had no job, no real plan, and no savings. I was just sort of existing, drifting aimlessly. Then it hit me. I was sick of being broke. I was tired of waiting for things to happen, and I had to make something happen for myself. But the question was, how? I had always been fascinated by business, particularly how small businesses could scale. I started doing some research online, reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and absorbing anything I could find. Slowly, a few ideas started to take root. One of the things I kept seeing over and over was that the internet had leveled the playing field. I didn't need a huge investment or a fancy office to start something. I could run a business from my laptop, and it didn't matter if I had a fancy degree or tons of experience. At first, I thought about starting an online store, maybe selling things like clothes or gadgets. But there were already so many big players in the market, and the competition was fierce. I knew I couldn't afford to play that game right away. So, I started thinking smaller. I thought, what if I could help people solve a specific problem? That's when I remembered how much trouble I had keeping my apartment organized. I had clothes everywhere, papers piled up, and my kitchen counter looked like it had been hit by a tornado. I realized that organizing was something I was decent at, and I wondered if other people felt the same way. After all, a lot of people were working full-time, raising kids, and dealing with life's chaos. Maybe they didn't have time or the mental energy to keep their homes organized. I decided to start a home organization business. I'd help people declutter, organize their homes, and create more functional spaces. I had no experience in professional organizing, but I figured I could learn. So, I took to Google again, researching everything from how to organize efficiently to how to market my services. I also looked up local competitors and saw that there was an underserved market in my city. Most people were either too busy to tackle their own clutter or didn't want to spend the time learning how to do it themselves. I started small. I put together a website using WordPress, and I threw together a few packages: basic decluttering, closet organization, and kitchen organization. I created a few social media accounts, mostly Instagram and Facebook, where I could share tips, before and after photos, and behind-the-scenes looks at my work. I also set my rates low to attract my first clients. I wanted to build a portfolio and get some testimonials. The goal was simple: I wanted to prove that I could do this and get word-of-mouth referrals. The first month was a struggle. I wasn't getting many clients, and when I did, they were often last-minute requests from people who were on a budget. I had to hustle to get my name out there, so I started offering discounts and free consultations. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to build credibility. I also reached out to local realtors, offering my services to help clients stage homes for sale. That got me a few more clients, and slowly but surely, I started building a reputation. By month 3, I had my first steady client, a busy mom who had just moved into a new house and needed help getting organized. I spent a few days with her, decluttering and setting up functional systems for her kitchen and living room. She was thrilled with the results and recommended me to her friends. Word started spreading, and I finally had a steady stream of clients. I was still doing everything myself, marketing, organizing, handling invoices, but the work was paying off. A year in, I had managed to scale my business in a few key ways. First, I hired a couple of part-time assistants to help with the physical labor. They could handle the heavy lifting while I focused on client relations and growing the business. Second, I started offering online consulting services. I realized that I could expand beyond my local market by offering virtual decluttering and organization advice. I started hosting Zoom calls with clients around the country and charging for my expertise. I created digital products like ebooks and printable planners, which became passive income streams. By 2018, I had a full-fledged business. I had a website that ranked on Google, an email list of loyal customers, and multiple employees working under me. I was no longer scraping by or hustling for clients. I had a solid system in place. I had also expanded my services to include office organization and virtual home design, which opened up new revenue streams. Then came the hard decision. Do I keep growing, or do I try something else? The business was doing well, but the market was becoming more competitive. So I made the decision to franchise. I partnered with a few of my employees and started opening new locations in nearby cities. It was terrifying to think about handing over parts of my business, but I knew it was the right move. The franchise model allowed me to scale quickly, and soon I had a business that was generating multiple six figures in revenue. Looking back, the journey was anything but easy. There were days I wanted to quit, days when clients didn't pay on time, and days when I doubted myself. But with each small success, I got more confidence. What kept me going was the simple belief that if I didn't try, I would never know what was possible. Every step was a leap of faith, and every failure was just a lesson learned. Now, I'm in a place where I can work on the business, not just in the business. I'm still passionate about helping people live more organized lives, but I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't just about passion. It's about building systems, taking calculated risks, and constantly adapting. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Just start. Don't wait for the perfect idea or the perfect time. Start small, make mistakes, and learn as you go. There will be times when you doubt yourself, but persistence is key. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen if you keep pushing. Thanks for reading. This is the story of how I went from being an overworked office drone with zero experience to building a company that now makes millions. I've learned a lot along the way, some things that I wish I knew earlier, others that I could have avoided. But let's start at the beginning. I graduated college in 2016 with a degree in marketing. I had big dreams, the kind that most of us have when we're 21 and full of optimism. I imagined I would land a big corporate job right away and work my way up the ladder. I did what any sensible person would do. I sent out hundreds of resumes to every company under the sun. After months of rejection or radio silence, I finally got a job offer from a small tech company in a city I barely knew. The salary wasn't great, but it was a start. I thought, hey, I'll pay my dues for a few years and then move on to something bigger. That was my first mistake. I underestimated how much work it would take to build a career in the corporate world. The company I joined was small, but growing rapidly, and I got caught up in the hustle. I was working 60+ hours a week, staying late to help with projects that weren't even my responsibility, and generally putting my personal life on hold. But I convinced myself that it was just part of the grind, that eventually it would pay off. Instead, I found myself burnt out and resentful. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. In fact, a lot of my coworkers were in the same boat. Unhappy with the amount of work they were putting in but too scared to leave because the paychecks were decent and the company had potential. It was this frustration that made me start questioning everything. Why am I working my butt off for someone else? I kept asking myself, why can't I build something of my own? It was a thought that sat in the back of my mind for months, until one day I had had enough. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no big fight with the boss or anything. I just walked into work one morning and everything clicked. I looked around at my coworkers and thought, we're all just cogs in the machine. This isn't what I want. That afternoon, I handed in my resignation. It wasn't a snap decision, but the moment I made it, I knew it was the right one. I was terrified, but also excited. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I wasn't going to keep working for someone else. I wanted to create something, a company that I could build from the ground up, but I didn't have a solid idea yet. I spent the next few weeks brainstorming, bouncing ideas off of friends and family, trying to figure out what kind of business I could start. One day, I was talking to a friend who had just gotten into freelancing. She was a graphic designer, and she told me how much freedom she had compared to a traditional job. As we talked, I realized that my marketing background could translate into helping freelancers like her grow their businesses. What if I could create a platform that helped freelancers manage their marketing, streamline their business operations, and get more clients? It seemed like a huge gap in the market. Most freelancers I knew struggled with these things because they were too busy doing the work itself. I got to work on the idea right away. I started by doing tons of market research, talking to freelancers, and trying to understand what tools they needed. I didn't have any tech experience, but I was determined to figure it out. I hired a developer and a designer, using a bit of savings I had, and began to build the platform. The first version of the product was rough. I didn't have a huge budget, so we focused on the basics. A simple website where freelancers could manage their projects, track their time, and easily invoice clients. I didn't have much of a network, but I leveraged what I did have. I reached out to everyone I knew, asking for feedback and referrals. Slowly but surely, I started getting some traction. The first few months were incredibly hard. I spent almost every waking moment on the business, tweaking the platform, updating the website, and hustling to get users. I was working 18-hour days, making little to no money, and wondering if it was all worth it. I was burnt out again, but this time it was different. There was no safety net, no paycheck coming at the end of the month. Every decision I made could either make or break the company. Then, in 2019, we got our first big break. A well-known influencer in the freelance space tweeted about our platform, saying it was the best tool they had used to manage their business. We went from 50 users to 500 overnight. Suddenly, our small platform was gaining attention, and people were signing up left and right. But it didn't stop there. The influx of new users meant I had to scale up the business quickly, adding more features, improving customer support, and refining our marketing efforts. The pressure was on, and there were moments when I thought about throwing in the towel. But every time I hit a wall, I remembered why I started. I wanted to build something of my own. I wanted to make a difference for the people who were struggling to manage their freelance businesses. And I wanted the freedom that came with being my own boss. As the years passed, our business grew exponentially. We went from being a small startup to a multi-million-dollar company. We expanded our services, added new features, and brought on a team of passionate people who believed in the mission. And through it all, I kept learning. I learned about leadership, marketing, finance, and most importantly, resilience. Building a company isn't just about having a great idea. It's about being able to pivot, adapt, and keep going when it feels like everything is falling apart. Today, we're in a great place. The company is profitable, and we've helped thousands of freelancers streamline their businesses. I've learned so much along the way, and I'm proud of what we've built. But if you had asked me back in 2016 if this was where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed you. Looking back, I see that my journey wasn't just about creating a company. It was about creating a life I was proud of. The freedom, the challenges, and the satisfaction of building something from nothing, those are the things that matter. So if you're thinking about making the leap, just know that it won't be easy. There will be dark days, long nights, and moments of doubt. But if you stick with it, and if you believe in what you're doing, it will be worth it. And most importantly, don't wait for the perfect moment. There's never a perfect moment. You just have to start. I always thought success would come easily if I worked hard enough, but it wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized how true that statement was. It wasn't until my fourth startup failed that I finally learned the true meaning of entrepreneurship, and the journey wasn't anything like I expected. I was in my mid-20s, freshly out of college, and ready to take on the world. I had an idea. In fact, I had lots of ideas. But I wasn't just an idea person. I had the fire and ambition to turn those ideas into something real. So, I set out to start my first business, determined to make a name for myself. I was convinced my big break was just around the corner. I gathered a small team, raised some funds, and we dove headfirst into developing a new app. The goal? To disrupt the tech space and build the next big thing. We put in long hours, sacrificed sleep, and burned through our budget faster than we could track. Looking back, the most ridiculous part was how naive I was. I thought all we had to do was build the app, and users would come. I didn't fully understand market fit, customer acquisition, or how hard it actually is to get noticed in a saturated industry. So, when the app launched and the downloads barely trickled in, I was devastated. I tried everything to fix it, from tweaking the design to slashing the price. But nothing worked. After 6 months of bleeding cash and morale, I had to face the hard truth. The company wasn't going to survive. I shut it down, and I walked away with nothing but a bruised ego and a mountain of debt. I thought I had failed. But failure, as I would later learn, is an essential part of the journey. I spent the next year licking my wounds and reflecting on what went wrong. I thought I was done with entrepreneurship for good, but that fire was still burning inside me. Around that time, I came across a quote that would change my perspective on everything. It was by Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That hit me hard. It clicked. I realized that failure wasn't the end. It was simply a lesson in disguise. Every misstep was another piece of the puzzle. So, I took some time to recover, get a few part-time jobs, and study successful entrepreneurs. I read books, attended seminars, and networked with people who had been where I was. I learned that most successful entrepreneurs didn't succeed on their first try. They failed, sometimes spectacularly, but they didn't quit. They adapted. That's when I decided to try again. This time, I was a little wiser, a lot more cautious, and far more prepared to face the brutal reality of building a company. I didn't have the same optimism that fueled my first venture, but I had something more valuable: experience. I took all the lessons I had learned, the mistakes, the failures, and the time I had spent doing everything wrong, and applied them to my new idea. I wanted to create a platform that helped small businesses with marketing. I knew from my own experience how difficult it was to navigate the overwhelming world of digital marketing. I was confident there was a way to help businesses succeed, and I thought I could be the one to make it happen. I started small. I didn't raise a huge amount of money this time. Instead, I bootstrapped the project. I built a simple website, offered free consultations, and slowly started building my client base. My goal wasn't to become a millionaire overnight. It was to make enough to pay the bills and slowly grow from there. In the first 6 months, progress was slow. I didn't have a fancy office or a large team, but I did have a few clients, and those clients were happy with the results. I poured everything into learning about their businesses and refining my services. With every win, I felt more confident in my vision. But as the business started to grow, the challenges mounted. At first, I couldn't afford to hire anyone, so I did everything myself. I wrote the content, handled customer service, and built the website. As much as I wanted to outsource some tasks, I couldn't. It was a constant grind, and there were days when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. There were weeks when I questioned whether I could do this. There were nights I stayed up late wondering if I was wasting my time. But then, a few months in, something started to click. Word of mouth spread, and I started getting more clients. They referred me to others, and before long, I had a steady stream of work coming in. I realized that my experience with my previous startup failures had prepared me for this moment. The confidence to push through the tough times, the understanding that nothing worth having comes easy, and the acceptance that setbacks are just part of the journey, they all made the difference. After a year, the business was profitable. It wasn't huge, but it was sustainable, and I was finally able to hire my first employee. I couldn't believe how far I had come. I went from having nothing, no income, no team, and a mountain of debt, to running a small but successful business. Of course, the journey didn't stop there. Every year brought new challenges. As the business grew, I had to make difficult decisions about scaling, outsourcing, and managing a larger team. But with every challenge, I felt more equipped to handle it. The lessons I learned from my earlier failures were invaluable. Eventually, the platform I had built started to attract more attention, and we began receiving offers from investors. I turned them down, not because the offers weren't tempting, but because I had learned the hard way that growing too quickly could be just as dangerous as growing too slowly. At this point, the business was running smoothly, and I had built a team that I was proud of. We had clients from all over the world, and our reputation for providing high-quality marketing services was growing. But I didn't stop there. I began to dream bigger. I wanted to expand our services and reach even more small businesses. And so, I took a deep breath and made the decision to raise funds and scale the company. This time, I was prepared. I knew the pitfalls. I knew the risks. And I was ready to take them. Now, several years later, my business is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, we've hired a talented team, and we've helped thousands of small businesses grow. But I still think back to the lessons I learned during my first few failed attempts. Those failures were not setbacks. They were stepping stones to where I am today. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous, and it's rarely easy. The road is filled with failure, rejection, and hard work. But if you're willing to learn from every mistake and keep moving forward, there's nothing stopping you from achieving your dreams. So to anyone out there who's struggling with their own business, take heart. You are not alone. Failure is just part of the process, and sometimes it's the most important part. Keep pushing forward, learn from every mistake, and trust that the journey will get you where you need to be. I've always been someone who liked to solve problems. I wasn't the best student in school, and I didn't come from a wealthy family, but I had an instinct for identifying opportunities. It wasn't until later in life that I realized this natural knack for problem solving would eventually lead me to build something from scratch that would change my life. It all started in my mid-20s. I was working at a small tech startup in San Francisco. The job was decent, and I had a team I liked, but something was missing. I had been working as a software developer for a few years, and though I enjoyed coding, I always felt like there was something more I was supposed to be doing. At the time, my main focus was on writing clean code, meeting deadlines, and trying to climb the corporate ladder, but in the back of my mind, I always had this nagging feeling. What if you could do something bigger? What if you could build your own company? It wasn't until I got the idea for my first business that things really started to click. I had been using a fitness app for months to track my progress. It was okay, but there were so many things that I thought could be better. The interface wasn't intuitive, the data didn't seem to sync properly, and there were no personalized recommendations based on my progress. I was getting frustrated with it, but then it dawned on me, why couldn't I build a better app myself? I knew that if I wanted to start something, I needed to start small. I didn't have tons of money saved up, and I definitely didn't have any investors knocking at my door. But what I did have was time, a basic understanding of app development, and the willingness to learn. So, I started researching. I spent countless hours online, watching tutorials, reading about user interfaces, and learning about the world of fitness apps. I realized that this was my chance, an opportunity to build something that could actually help people and make a real impact. I worked on this project during my nights and weekends. I would code until 2 a.m., then wake up for work at 7 a.m. to repeat the cycle. For the first few months, it felt like I was going nowhere. Every time I thought I had made progress, something would break, or I'd encounter another issue that would slow me down. The app was buggy, the design was terrible, and I had no clue how to market it. I was determined to make it work, but there were plenty of nights where I thought about giving up. Eventually, I decided to take a leap of faith. I had saved up enough money to quit my job and go full-time on the app. It wasn't easy to make that decision. The security of a steady paycheck was hard to give up, and I remember feeling terrified about the uncertainty of everything. But I kept thinking back to all the hours I had spent coding, learning, and iterating on the app. It wasn't just an idea anymore. It was something I had put my heart and soul into. I rented a small office, set up a desk with a cheap laptop, and went to work. The first few months were rough. The app wasn't bringing in any revenue, and I had no idea how to scale it. But I knew I needed feedback from users if I was going to improve it. So, I posted about the app on Reddit, asking for people to test it out and provide honest feedback. I was shocked when people actually started using it. They pointed out bugs, gave suggestions, and told me how much they loved the idea. Slowly but surely, I started making progress. I worked on refining the user interface, improving the syncing issues, and adding the personalized recommendations feature. As I listened to feedback and made adjustments, more and more users started downloading the app. It wasn't anything massive, but the growth was steady, and I could feel things starting to click. One of the best decisions I made early on was focusing on building a community. I created a blog where I shared my development journey, the challenges I was facing, and how I was working to make the app better. People loved seeing the behind-the-scenes process, and I was able to build a loyal group of users who felt like they were part of the app's development. I started engaging with them on social media, hosting Q/and sessions, and running small contests to keep them excited. This helped me build brand loyalty, and over time, I saw the number of daily users steadily increase. By the time the app reached its first 10,000 downloads, I realized that I couldn't keep doing everything on my own. I needed help, especially with marketing and customer support. So, I hired a small team. It was a big risk for me. Hiring people meant more expenses, but I knew it was the only way to move forward. The team I brought on was small but incredibly passionate about the project. We had one person handling customer support, another focusing on marketing, and a designer who helped polish the app's interface. With the team in place, things really started to accelerate. We launched a premium subscription model, which allowed us to generate some revenue. The app was still far from perfect, but it had enough users and features to justify the cost. We also started collaborating with fitness influencers who helped promote the app to their audiences. This was a game changer. As the app gained traction, we started getting press coverage, which further fueled its growth. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were plenty of moments when I doubted myself. At one point, a competitor launched a similar app with much more advanced features, and I thought for sure that we were done for. But instead of panicking, I doubled down on what made our app unique, our focus on community and user feedback. We launched new features based on real user requests, and we made sure to communicate openly with our customers about what we were working on. By the end of year 2, the app had grown to over 100,000 downloads, and we had started generating enough revenue to hire more people. I was finally able to pay myself a salary, and I felt like I had made it. But the real moment of triumph came when I got a message from a user who told me that our app had helped them lose 50 pounds and drastically improve their health. It was the validation I needed to remind me why I had started in the first place, to help people. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy, and there were countless moments where I wanted to quit. But the one thing I learned was that persistence pays off. Every late night, every failure, every bit of doubt was just part of the process. Building a business isn't about finding the right idea. It's about having the persistence to work through the tough times, adapt, and keep pushing forward. If you're committed to solving a problem and helping people, success will follow. Starting from nothing and building something meaningful took time, sacrifice, and a lot of hard work. But now, I can confidently say that following my instincts and taking that leap of faith was the best decision I ever made. The business isn't a massive unicorn yet, but it's mine, and I'm proud of what I've built. I've always believed that the best entrepreneurs are the ones who are able to turn obstacles into opportunities. That was something I learned early on when I started my first business at the age of 23. I came from a small town where people often saw entrepreneurship as a risky gamble. They preferred the security of a steady paycheck, but I had this burning desire to create something of my own. Little did I know, my journey would be filled with failures, doubts, and moments where I questioned whether I should just quit and get a job like everyone else. It all started when I was in college. I was studying business and working part-time at a retail store to pay for my tuition. I'd seen enough of the corporate world to know that I didn't want to be stuck in a 9-to-5 job for the rest of my life. But like most people, I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. I'd always had this idea to create an online store selling niche products, but it was just an idea at first. I had no experience with e-commerce, no network, and no real idea how to make it happen. I just knew I wanted to try. One evening after a long shift at work, I went home and started researching. I learned about dropshipping, basically a way to sell products without holding inventory. It sounded perfect for me, so I decided to dive in. The next day, I built a basic website on Shopify, picked out a few products to sell, and launched my store. I didn't have a big marketing budget, so I decided to focus on social media, posting ads on Instagram and Facebook. My friends thought I was crazy. "You're going to sell stuff online? How's that even going to work?" they asked. But I didn't care. I had a gut feeling that I could make it work if I stuck with it. The first few weeks were miserable. My website was basic, my ads weren't generating much traffic, and I wasn't getting any sales. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe this was a stupid idea. Maybe I should have just stuck to my plan of finding a stable job after graduation. But something kept me going. It wasn't just the dream of financial freedom. It was the idea that I could build something from scratch and make it work. One day, a miracle happened. I woke up to an email notification. I had made my first sale. It was only $25, but to me, It felt like $1 million. I realized that it was possible. The hard part was just getting started. The sale gave me the motivation to keep going. So I worked even harder on improving my website, making my ads more appealing, and refining the customer experience. But, as you probably guessed, things didn't exactly go as smoothly from there. Every time I thought I was getting closer to success, I'd hit another wall. The supplier I was working with stopped responding to my orders, and I had to find a new one. My ads got flagged multiple times for violating Facebook's ad policies, and I had to go through the lengthy process of getting them approved again. Customer service was a nightmare because I had no idea how to handle returns or complaints. And when a product I was selling was out of stock, it caused a delay in shipment that led to a few angry customers. My reputation was on the line. I remember one particular night when I got an email from a customer demanding a refund because they hadn't received their order in time. I couldn't even sleep, thinking about how I was going to resolve it. But after some quick research, I realized that the issue wasn't my fault. It was the supplier's fault for not updating their inventory properly. I reached out to the customer, explained the situation, and offered them a discount on their next order. Thankfully, they understood, and that incident taught me an important lesson about customer service. Sometimes, it's not about fixing the problem immediately, but about showing your customers that you care. Despite all the hurdles, things started improving slowly but surely. I began learning more about marketing, SEO, and how to optimize my online store for better sales. I also began connecting with other entrepreneurs, exchanging tips and advice. It was a steep learning curve, but the more I learned, the more confident I became in my ability to grow my business. A year in, I was starting to see real traction. I wasn't making huge profits, but I was covering my costs and even saving a little. My friends were still skeptical. They didn't see the potential of online businesses and thought it was just a phase. But I knew I had found something worth pursuing. Then, one day, I received a call from a potential investor who had seen my business online. He was interested in helping me scale it up, but only if I could prove that I had a solid business model. This was a huge turning point for me. I realized I couldn't continue doing everything on my own. I needed to hire a team and streamline my operations. I started with one employee, someone who could handle customer service while I focused on marketing and growing the business. Over the next 2 years, the business grew significantly. We went from a one-person operation to a small team of 5. I learned how to delegate, how to work with suppliers, and how to handle the complexities of scaling a business. We began to focus more on branding, quality control, and offering a better customer experience. I wasn't just selling products anymore. I was building a brand that people trusted. But success didn't come without its challenges. During the holiday season, one of our suppliers faced a major shipment delay, and we had to deal with angry customers who were expecting their orders before Christmas. It felt like everything was falling apart, but I knew I couldn't give up. Instead of panicking, I contacted every customer personally, apologized for the delay, and offered them a full refund or a gift card to use in the future. We ended up losing a few customers, but the majority appreciated the honesty and transparency. By the time I was 28, my business had reached a point where I could consider it a success. I had a steady stream of income, a loyal customer base, and a growing team. Looking back, I realized that every failure, every moment of doubt, and every obstacle had been an opportunity to learn and grow. I had taken something that seemed like a crazy idea at the time and turned it into a legitimate business. Now, at 30, I'm still learning. I've expanded into new markets, launched additional product lines, and even started mentoring other entrepreneurs. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm proud of how far I've come. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every moment of struggle. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes persistence, patience, and the willingness to fail and try again. The road to entrepreneurship is messy, and it often feels like there are more downs than ups. But if you can embrace the process and keep moving forward, there's a good chance you'll eventually find your way. I'm just one story in a sea of entrepreneurs who've overcome their own obstacles. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, know this: it won't be easy. But if you stick with it, you'll get through the hard times and look back with pride at what you've accomplished. Keep going. I grew up in a small town where the idea of success was as abstract as a dream. Most people followed the same routine: go to school, get a job, work 9 to 5, get married, and buy a house. That was the life they envisioned, and for a lot of people, that was all there was. But I wasn't content with that. I always wanted more, but I wasn't entirely sure what more even looked like. The turning point for me happened when I was in high school. I was an avid gamer and spent hours playing online games. I remember reading an article about a guy who made a living playing video games professionally. At that moment, something clicked. Why can't I do that? I thought. I started researching the world of esports, content creation, and online streaming. I was hooked. I didn't have the best equipment. My computer was a hand-me-down from my older brother, and my internet was spotty at best, but I saw it as a challenge. So, I started streaming on a platform that was still relatively new at the time. I didn't have any followers. No one knew who I was. My streams were quiet, and I was lucky if 1 or 2 people would tune in. But I didn't care. I loved the idea of building something from the ground up, even if it meant starting small. I spent years streaming, making content, and working on my brand. I learned everything from video editing to social media marketing to community building. Every bit of progress felt like a small victory. But there were also plenty of setbacks. I remember a few months into it, I lost my internet connection for an entire week. It was frustrating, especially when I had just started gaining a few loyal followers. After a few years, I realized something crucial. I wasn't just building a following. I was building a business. The content I was creating had value, and people were willing to pay for it in various forms. I started diversifying. I opened a merchandise store, began working with sponsors, and launched my own subscription-based content. It felt like a real business. I went from a broke high schooler with a dream to someone making a full-time income doing something I loved. But success didn't come without its own set of problems. As my business grew, so did the expectations. I needed to keep up with the constant demand for new content, engage with my growing audience, and juggle partnerships with sponsors. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, as if the pressure was too much. The biggest challenge, however, was managing my time. I wanted to give 100% to every project, but I only had so many hours in the day. To cope with the workload, I hired my first employee, someone to help manage my social media and handle the logistics of merchandise distribution. It was a leap of faith. I had no formal experience in managing people, and I had no idea what I was doing. But it paid off. I realized that to scale the business, I needed a team. Building a team wasn't easy. The first few hires didn't work out. Some weren't a good cultural fit. Others simply didn't understand the vision I had. But after a while, I found a solid group of people who were not only talented but passionate about the work. I gave them ownership over different aspects of the business, and that's when things really started to take off. We launched new products, expanded our content platforms, and collaborated with other influencers. Slowly but surely, I began to realize that I wasn't just running a small business anymore. We were becoming a brand. But with that growth came more risks. There were months where we spent more money than we made, and the fear of running out of funds kept me up at night. But I had to remind myself that every business goes through cycles, and what mattered most was that we kept moving forward. By the time I hit my mid-20s, I had managed to scale the business to 6 figures. I was living in a nice apartment, had a couple of employees, and my work felt like it had purpose. But deep down, I knew I was just scratching the surface. There was more to be done, and I was ready to take it to the next level. At that point, I faced a new set of challenges. There were bigger competitors in the space, and I had to figure out how to stand out. The gaming and streaming industry was growing fast, and I needed to be innovative. I spent countless hours brainstorming, researching trends, and speaking to other entrepreneurs. One day, I had an idea. Why not create a platform that helps other small creators? I was tired of seeing content creators struggle with the same things I had in the beginning: lack of exposure, low-quality tools, and inconsistent income streams. I had the experience, the audience, and the resources to make a difference. So, I launched a new platform, a community for creators that offered tools, resources, and partnerships to help them succeed. The launch was a risk. I was diverting my attention from the core business, and the new project required a lot of investment. But it felt right. I wanted to build something that could give back to the community that had supported me. The early days were difficult, but after months of hard work, we started to see real traction. More and more creators joined the platform, and the network began to grow. We provided workshops, online resources, and even started offering sponsorships to creators. The platform became a success, but it was not without its own challenges. The competitive landscape was fierce, and the pressure to keep innovating never stopped. I had to constantly think ahead, build new features, and find new ways to engage with creators. But the rewards were worth it. The platform didn't just make money, it helped thousands of creators build sustainable businesses, just like I had. Looking back, I realized that entrepreneurship isn't just about building a business, it's about problem solving, adapting, and learning from failure. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been incredibly rewarding. I've learned that success isn't just about reaching a certain financial goal or hitting a milestone. It's about building something meaningful that impacts others in a positive way. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone starting out, it would be this: don't be afraid to take risks. You'll face setbacks, and there will be moments when you question your decisions. But if you stick with it, adapt, and keep pushing forward, you'll surprise yourself. You never know how far you can go until you try. Today, I'm proud of what I've built, but I'm also excited for what's next. There's still so much more to learn and new horizons to explore. And I know that the best is yet to come. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.